Hello everyone, and today we'll be going over the Ymir guide. Now Ymir, for the point of all my guides, this main purpose is for Conquest game mode. So we'll be starting off at level 1, and I'll be going over each of the skills. Well, actually, I'll be going to level 5, and I'll be showing off what each of the skills are. Then I'll de-level to level 1, show how you're supposed to like clear away with Ymir, what his wall is supposed to be like, and this is for each and every god. And then lastly, I'll go over item builds. Then I'll go over advanced tactics with Ymir that some people actually might not know. So starting things off, Ymir. Before anything else, we'll look at his abilities, his kit. So before going into his passive Frostbite, I want to go over his Glacial Strike, Force Breath, and Shards of Ice. So we'll level up to level 5. Okay. So I'm going to show visual examples of these first. I'll just have a point the one just to show that off too. Glacial Strike, his 2, shoots out a carpet. His 3, and his ultimate. Just to show that off. Now, why did I show those off? Well, the reason I showed them off was because of the fact that each of these abilities, I want to show a visual representation of them before going into his passive. His passive is Frostbite. So if you hit anyone with his 2, his 3, or his ultimate, okay, they get a debuff on them. And this debuff lasts for 4 seconds. The debuff is, what it does is it makes your basic attacks do double damage for however long the debuff is on, and it applies a damage reduction debuff on them for 10% of whatever damage they do. So if they were to do if they do 100 damage, they would do 90 while they are affected by Frostbite. To show a better visual example of this, I'm going to get penetration real quick, and then I'll show you from the bottom my basic attack and basic attack from Odin's. That should be enough. So my basic attack is 64 right now. So I'm swinging for 2 damage. If I were to hit them with, we'll do my 3. Okay? And they have Frostbite armor, I do double the damage. So this is actually not a full 64, this is more like 63.5. I'll get, it should be about 30, 35. So if I were to freeze him and do a basic, it's 70. It's double damage. It might not show always double damage because there might actually be a decimal. It might not be a true number. But overall, overall you're going to be doing double for your basic attacks for 4 seconds, so long as the debuff is on them. Next up, the 2, Glacial Strike. Before I'm gonna go into the wall and all that, I'm gonna talk about his abilities first. I already showed off Glacial Strike, Force Breath, and Shards of Ice. However, there is more interesting things you can do with it. One high note with Glacial Strike. So it looks simple. It's a force carpet. You throw out the 2, and then ice spikes come out. Is this visual examples, right? No. These ice spikes are when the damage comes out. The ice spike, so if I were to put my 2 here, notice when the damage comes up. The damage comes up once the spikes come up. This is very important to note. When you are not CCing an enemy or an ally or any sort of aspect like that, if you have to lead Glacial Strike a lot of the time if they're running away from you or running side to side, because of the fact that Glacial Strike, it's actually a very long quote-unquote ability in Smite. Some abilities are very instantaneous. Glacial Strike, you have to wait till the ice spikes come out, so you have to do a lot of leading. His 2, Glacial Strike, also applies a 35% slow if you hit the enemy. So if they are moving at 400, we'll do something simple. If they're moving at 100 movement speed, and you hit them with the slow, they will be going 35 less speed. So they'll end up going 65 speed normally. So that's the contents of it. That's how the slow works. Force Breath. Next up, I'm not going over Ice Wall yet because there's more involvement with Ice Wall than people give credit for. Force Breath. This ability is a cone attack and applies a stun from 1.25 seconds to 2.25 seconds, depending on what level / rank you have of this. The damage is 50 to 210. Normally, if you're going more damage, you want Glacial Strike than Force Breath, but Force Breath you want to have to be able to hit Glacial Strike easily. Anyway, going on. Force Breath is a cone, and anyone trapped in this cone gets frozen. Okay? They are CC'd, they cannot move, they cannot jump, they cannot do anything while they are frozen like that. But however, key note, this does not count as its own separate CC ability. This counts as a stun. So anything that would negate a stun, it will stop Force Breath, even though it looks like you're freezing the enemy. Force Breath, as I said earlier, with Glacial Strike and Shards of Ice, they both all apply Force Bite. So you can freeze someone and then basic them for double damage. So I'm doing 35. 70. Okay. Overall, Force Breath is it's very useful for close CC. However, it's not useful for very close CC. What do I mean by this? Is the best way to dodge Force Breath is if you're within the front of Ymir, walk towards him and to his side. Ymir has to turn around and try to freeze you within the very short part of the cone. If you're out here, it's easier for him to hit because of the fact he has a higher radius to hit you. Or a higher cone, I should say, to hit you. Meanwhile, if you're here, if you walk this way, if you walk right next to him here where my mouse is, then he will miss you with his Force Breath. And he has to do this whole animation of putting his mouth out and blowing frost onto you. So he is very punishable during that. That's a very good note to think about when you're fighting a Ymir or versing Ymir in general. I will go over an advanced technique with Force Breath when I go over Ice Wall. Next up, Shards of Ice. So how Shards of Ice work is it's a channeled ability that gives Ymir CC immunity. What is CC immunity? CC immunity is, well, I showed off what his 3 did. It's a stun, it's a freeze. They are stuck in this for 1.25 seconds to 2.25 seconds. While they are frozen, they can't do anything. This stun is considered a CC, a crowd control, making them, it controls the crowd, controls your enemies, it stops them from doing stuff. So, while Ymir is in Shards of Ice, he is CC immune. So, if there was another Ymir on the enemy team and he were to try to freeze you and you're in your ultimate, you won't be frozen, you'll still be doing your ultimate. If there is a Ares and he attempts to pull you with his ultimate and to pull you to him, if you use your ultimate while his ult's going off, you will not be pulled because you are CC immune. Anyway, going on. This ability, it's a 3-second channel ability. So, while doing it, 1, 2, 3, and then explodes and does damage. At rank 1, this is a very high damage ultimate for 500. Continuing with the Shards of Ice, a keynote to talk about since this is a channeled ability, this is similar to Neat's ultimate and a few other instances where there'll be, which I'll talk about in later God guides. But for Ymir, with the channel ultimate of his Shards of Ice, if you can cancel this ultimate early by right-clicking on it. For Neat's case, you shoot early on her arrow. Right-clicking would be canceling the arrow. But you can right-click early with the ability to do less damage. However, this damage, it's actually very interesting. For right now, I'm going to go true damage real quick just to show. So this should be true. Okay. And I'm doing 830 damage. So if I were to do this ultimate for 1 second, well, for the max damage, it will be 830, as you'll see here. 830. Very cool note. So, very cool doing true damage to show that off. But when you're doing the ability early, if you're canceling it a second into it, so it takes a max to do the max channeling is 3 seconds to do your max damage. So how the game implements what damage you'll do is if you stay in it for a second, it will be make it a fraction over 3. So if I were to stay in it for 1 second, it will be 1 over 3, so it's 1/3, times whatever the max damage I would do would be. So in this case, it would be 830. So if I were to do my ultimate 5 seconds, how it will work is it should do about 415 damage. So 1, 2, yeah, 434. So that was about 1.5 seconds. and that's how the ability works. There is a limiting cap on the ability, so like it can do there's a minimum amount. It won't be like if you do it for like 0.1 second, you'll only get 83 damage off. If you immediately do it, the easiest it'll do is about a fourth of the actual damage it can do instantly. That's the limit cap on it, so you can't go below that. It's a very important note to do, so you can't just be like, oh, you can't. It's not to diminish your damage. It's still an ultimate. Okay, and this also applies the Frostbite passive. Anyone hit within the shards of ice is also slowed for 30% of their movement speed. So if they have 100 movement speed and are hit by shards of ice, they will end up taking they will end up going to 70 movement because they will be minus 30 on them. Now going over his ice wall. I didn't go over this before because of the fact there's some really cool, interesting things you can. Well, there's some really interesting things you can do with the ability. His ice wall, how it works is whatever way he's facing, a wall spawns perpendicular to for up to 70 meters. And how the wall works, as I said before, it's perpendicular, and it lasts a certain amount of time. At rank 1, it's 2 seconds. Yeah, rank 1, 2 seconds. Rank 3, 3 rank 2, 3 seconds. Rank 3, 4 seconds. Rank 4, 5 seconds, and rank 5, 6 seconds. So, however, whatever you have, it stays up for that long. So, for it should be up for 2 seconds, and then it disappears. Very interesting thing I'm going to touch upon while going over this ability is going back to his Force Breath real quick. You can Force Breath through walls. So if there was an enemy on... Actually, I could show this the best way I can is with Ra. So let me get Ra over here real quick. I'll edit this out. Okay, I'm back. Notice how, even though I'm behind a wall here, I can still hit this Ra with my Force Breath. That's very interesting to know. You can do the same thing with your Glacial Strike also. If he's behind the wall here, and I will throw out my 2, it will still hit him. Also, let's kill you, because I don't like you. But anyway, continuing on, why is this important to note? Especially why am I covering this now while I'm going with Ice Wall? Well, Ice Wall counts as a player-made wall. So if I were to place a wall and someone has to have an ability that doesn't go through walls, for example, a dash or something, excluding Ganesha, you will get stuck here. They can't continue going through it. One keynote is if you have your wall and there's an enemy on the other side of it, feel free to freeze them through your wall. They will be frozen through it. Interesting note, you can also do the same thing with Glacial Strike. It's very cool. It's very useful for baiting because a lot of people forget about it when they see the wall. They think, oh, Ymir can't do anything when because of the fact he screwed up on his wall. Like, why would he want to get close to me or anything like that? But you can just use this, cover yourself with your wall with a block auto attacks, and then freeze them. Continuing onwards, talking more about Ice Wall, and this is going now into item builds specifically. I know I said about how we were originally going to go into lane, talking about level 1 and all that, but I feel this is actually more relevant now before I go into that. So, a very interesting note about Ymir. Ymir's major weakness is the fact that he has no real mobility. He has no dash, he has no jump, he doesn't have any increased movement speed. He only has CC, damage, and a cutoff. Sort of. But I would count this as crowd control, even though it doesn't count as a CC in the game. Anyway, regardless. A very interesting note is Ymir at at early game, he can't go through his wall. He can't put it up and go straight through it. You can put it at your feet, and until you get boots 2, you will not go through your wall. But why did I mention that? Why is it that when you get boots 2, you can start moving straight through your wall? Well, in this purpose, in the training mode, because of how lag works and all that, I can actually go through my wall without boots 2. But in a normal game, you're going to want movement to be able to do this. Anyway, why is this boots 2 the magic number here? What happens at this? If I were to put my wall at my feet while walking straight, if I were to do it, I go straight through my wall and cut off anyone behind me. This is a very useful tactic for Ymir to use because he has no mobility. And this instance, him doing this stops people from actually again chasing him. You have to be very careful though. If you are slowed during this duration, you will not go through your wall. If you were to put it down and be slowed, so I'll walk a little. I will sell the boots real quick. And you know, even though I am on a legless server, because technically speaking I'm in jungle practice, I'll put the wall a little bit ahead. If you had boots too, you could technically go through this on this, but in this purpose I'm showing it as if this was the same environment. If you were to put it at your feet and try to go through, you'll get blocked. So this is a very important aspect to note. So with Ymir, once you get boots 2 online, you can go through your walls depending on lag / latency issues. Now, before going into item builds, I'm going to now cover his level 1 to 20. I'm going over what Ymir excels at. Ymir is a guardian. His whole entire purpose a lot of the time is to CC, protect your carries. He's supposed to be a support. He can also be played in solo lane. He can also be played as in jungle. I have seen him in mid, but I don't recommend ever in mid. He cannot be played as an ADC because normally you need rain damage for ADC. Continuing onwards. Ymir, his job, I'm going to first talk about when he's support. His job is to help his ally clear waves. Specifically, Ymir early game, because of the double basic attack damage he does, he actually has a very fast wave clear. There's only a few gods that beat his wave clear. Those gods include Sylvanas, Ganesha, at times Sobek can, but it depends. Depends on how good of a tail whip. If he gets his tail whip out before you get Glacial Strike, he beats you because he gets more pressure on you. There's a few other instances, but those are just to name a few. Anyway, Ymir, how he clears a wave with his teammate is normally at the start of the game, he would go watches. Again, I'll go more into item builds, but he would go watches and boots or watches and locals mask, and he would go up to the wave, and with his teammate, he would 2 the wave and start a basic thing, saving last hits for his ally. So to show a physical example, once these minions spawn in. Okay, minions spawn in. If I were to use my 2 on it, okay, they take damage. And then you do the double damage for 4 seconds, and they do reduce damage on your minions. That's an important note. One key thing is, if you had to hit anything, if you had to hit either the melees or the archers, hit the archers. The archers do the most damage, not only to your minions, but also to you and your teammate. If you were to take minion aggro, archers can't miss. Minions, you can kite around. The sword minions, you can kite around and dodge them. But the archers don't miss. They don't care. They don't care if you're on the other side of the map. If they shot at you, they will travel. Their arrows will travel across space and time to hit you. They are little jerks, and they are very powerful early game, and they're bane to a lot of fights early game. Like, you don't want to fight into a minion wave. That's the #1 thing in this game. For early game, you don't want to fight into minion waves. Anyway, continuing onwards. Let me sell this. I did not mean to undo. But continuing onwards. Ymir, his clear is at level 1, he uses 2. His point is he's not trying to take last hits from his teammate, but you guys, overall, you want to clear fast. You want to clear first in the early game. Continuing onwards, at level 2, you normally want your Force Breath. Very rarely would you ever want your Ice Wall, and rarely ever would you want to take it. There are instances where it can be useful, but for the most part, you want Force Breath. One key note, I didn't mention this at the beginning of level order, is at level 1, until minion waves meet up, or until like you guys are fighting or something, don't put a point in any of your abilities. You might need your Force Breath in case you guys are invading, in case you and your team decide, hey, we're going to try and fight them at level 1. No, you can't really do that now, because of the fact that there's not really anything you can really contest at level 1, because the jungle camps don't spawn in immediately, but this can change in the future, so that's why I'm mentioning this. Other than that, you would normally take his 2. I talked about at level 2, you'll take his Force Breath. At level 3, so this is the first instance of your decision. Depending on how the game goes, if you guys have a lot of pressure in lane, you might want Ice Wall first. The reason why is because in Ice Wall, You can cut off an escape of the enemy ADC or the enemy support if they don't have mobility, and you can get a pick off them and get first blood off it. If you guys are having a little bit harder time wave clearing, or like it's not really like you're not really having the advantage, take a point in your glacial strike. The reason why is this way you can clear fast. You can clear fast, help your team clear faster. Specifically, help your ADC clear fast and let them get last hits. But again, minion wave goes first before getting last hits. But if you can, last hits are for the ADC. At level 4, you take a point in your Ice Wall, or in Ymir's case, if you got Ice Wall at level 3, you would get your second point in Glacial Strike. At level 5, and I will go into more level 5, talking about the solo lane real quick. But at level 5, you should always take your ultimate, unless, again, in the solo lane, I will talk about that when after this, talking about the solo lane level up. But normally you would always take your Shards of Ice. At level 6, this I would suggest taking another place of point in Glacial Strike. You can also start leveling up Force Breath, but I would suggest doing one more point in Glacial Strike before starting to go into Force Breath. Why is this? Well, because at level 7, if you're in the solo lane, you always want Glacial Strike. In level 7, Glacial Strike at rank 4 normally will instant clear minion waves once you get boots and that online. But at level 4 will instant clear minion waves. Your point a lot of the time is you want to not kill the minions. You want to watch your ally kill the minions, your ADC. And you also want to control as much as possible. If you were to put the 4th rank into this, a lot of time when you get to reach the level 7, you will be clearing the minion wave with your level 4 of Glacial Strike. When you have damage up. So normally in this case, I would talk about Force Breath. I would start leveling up Force Breath to add more CC to the table. At level 8, Force Breath. At level 9, Ultimate or Force Breath. That's your first. That's another major decision you want to take. Ultimate is in case they don't have a lot of leaps or ways to get out. If you trap them with your wall, then you can just get the point in your ultimate, that way you can do more damage. If not, Force Breath to reapply more CC to them. Level 10, another point in Force Breath. Level 11, Force Breath should be maxed out and you should already have your second point in Glacial Strike. Not Glacial Strike, in Shards of Ice. At level 12, start maxing out Glacial Strike. Level 13, you can put a point into Shards of Ice. Again, same thing as level 9. If they have no real leaps and escapes, you can put the point into that. If not, Glacial Strike, that way it's more confirmable damage. At level 14, oh, that's cooldowns. At level 14, this should how you should always look. Ice Wall, the only time you would have Ice Wall leveled up is if you're going for more gimmicky, but this is for purposes of Conquest. A lot of time, Ice Walls, it would be the last thing you level up. So 15 and 16, Ice Wall. Anytime you have a point into your ultimate, you put it in. 18, 19, and then 20. So that's for support. Now talking about solo lane. In the solo lane, it's more cookie cutter. You put a point into your 2. At level 3, you get Force Breath. Level 2, you get Force Breath. At level 3, you normally always want Glacial Strike. At level 4, this is actually up to debate. You can take a point into your Ice Wall or your Force Breath. Normally, I like having all 3 of my abilities. Level 5. So this is one of the first major decisions in the solo lane. In the solo lane, depending on how it goes, if you know for a fact you're not really gonna get the ult off on them, take Glacial Strike. In solo lane, it's all about wave clearing. So with Glacial Strike, you can wave clear a lot faster than them, because normally they would take a point into their ultimate, so they have a rank 2 of their wave clear. At level 6, this is what you should look like. At level 7, in the solo lane, you should want to take Glacial Strike. At level 8, now this is personally up to you. I like point skipping in this circumstance. What is point skipping? I do this a lot with majority of the guides I talk about. Point skipping is at level 8 you take nothing, because at level 8 your only 2 options are Ice Wall and Force Breath. And at level 9 you get the choice between your ultimate and rank 5 and ability. And you can either take one of them if you get to level 9 if you put a point into your 1 or 3 right now, or you can save that point and skip the putting a point into this level, and at level 9 you can put a point in both your 2 and your ultimate, or whatever your wave clear ability is and your ultimate. This is very useful in a lot of gods. Specifically, the best one I can point out is Scylla because of her passive, but I'll go into that when I talk about in a Scylla guide. But regardless, in the solo lane, you should most likely want this. You most likely want your build to look like this, unless, of course, they can have ways to escape shards of ice, in which case you want the point into your Force Breath. Then at level 10 to 12, you want to put points into your Force Breath. And at level 13, same decision, like I said earlier, you either want to put the point into your ultimate or point into Force Breath. And same thing from there, as the support. When you're in support, you want to put a point anytime you can into your ultimate, and then put points into your 1 any other time. So, point to the ultimate, boom, boom. So, that's in terms of the actual ability, that's in terms of the actual leveling order itself. Now to talk about items. Lastly, to talk about items. So, if you're doing support, like I said earlier, Watch's Gift is normally always the way to go. Watch's Gift and Lono's Mask, normally, how these both work is, actually I'm going to buy Lono's Mask to show a great example of it right now with minions. But how this works is if I were to see the killing blow onto the minion, I get that little assist gold. That 5 extra gold that came up, that little plus 5G, it shows the 17G and then the plus 5G. That plus 5G is from Watch's Gift, because I was within the assist of a killing blow to a minion without dealing it. So I also get health from that back. And you notice here, I'm also getting stacks here on Lono's Mask. How Lono's Mask works is the same as Watch's, where if I watch a killing blow onto a minion, like I do not do the killing blow, but I watch it happen, I get a stack, and then once I get 75, for each stack I get plus 2 health, I'm pretty sure, right? Plus 2 max health. This stacks up to 75 times. At the 75 stacks, once this hits it, I get 500 gold, right? 500? Oh no, 400 gold, sorry. I get 400 gold. And this is very useful in support because of the fact a lot of time you're behind in gold. Talking about item-wise now. My voice just went to crap. But, item-wise, boots. Ymir benefits from all 4 boots. Traveler shoes in support is normally always the way to go. Depends on how it goes off, but traveler shoes gets you extra gold in the support wall, which, as I said earlier, the support you normally are behind in gold. And this helps you with mobility-wise, because Ymir has very bad mobility. But as I said earlier, once you hit rank 2 of boots, you can use your wall to cut yourself off from people. Reinforced shoes is very useful for being tanky. Again, this is useful in both support and solo, but in solo there are better options, and in support I recommend traveler shoes over reinforced, but it's still useful. Shoes of Focus and pen boots or shoes of Magi. Shoes of Focus is very good when it comes to you want to be a CC heavy character or a cooldown heavy character. A lot of the time in solo lane, if I have another high damaging mage on my team and I have another guardian on my team, Shoes of the Focus is sometimes the way to go, because of the fact that if I have another high damaging mage, I'm just mainly there to help them out, to be a frontliner and to freeze them that way. My high damage mage can burst them down. Though if in Shoes of the Focus's case, it helps you also getting your 2 back faster for wave clearing if you're in the solo lane. It helps you in the support wall when it comes to more freezes. Overall it's very good. Shoes of the Magi is very useful if you want to pub stomp / snowball. When I say this as in for snowball purposes, Shoes of the Magi, what it will do is if you got early first blood on your lane, because Ymir is good at picking people off early game with his wall and then freezing them off at level 3. With Shoes of the Magi, you will be pretty much doing not true damage, but you'll be doing almost true damage early game with pen boots. And Ymir has very good high damaging abilities early game. 500 damage on an ultimate. Again, this is if you channel it for 3 seconds, but the minimum it can do is 125. It's still great. Glacial Strike. Actually, to show this off, I'm gonna get an item real quick. The best way to show this off, I'm going to get what's something with 100 power. That's 50. I can show something with 10 also. This has 10 power. Okay. His scaling. He has 150 scaling on Shards of Ice. His Force Breath is 50% scaling, and his Glacial Strike is 70%. You also need to you need to remember because of the fact that how in early game, how a lot of time like people don't have as much cooldowns, they don't have as many leaps in that. If you were to have pen boots, let me get the normal. Oops. And if you were to get pen boots first, you would be doing you would end up be doing, so this would normally, by the time you would have penetration boots, you would only be about level 6, maybe level 5. And 230 plus another 31, that's actually, show this off. So you will be doing 261.5 damage, so that's great. On top of the fact you're basic, because of the fact you have penetration boots, normally because of the fact how protections work, I should be doing, with a basic attack here, my basic will do 56 damage, but I'm fairly certain because of how penetration and all that, I should be doing about 52. Actually 47, my bad. 5 less. If I were to sell this real quick. 36, if I were to get Shoes of the Focus. 42. So how it would work is I would get an extra 5 extra damage off it because of the penetration. This is extremely useful when it comes, well, this is extremely useful, again, for snowballing. But a lot of time as a support, I highly suggest Traveler Shoes. Again, this is first off starting off support. I'll go into solo right after this. Second off is support wise, it depends on the matchup. If you guys have a lot of auto attackers on your team and they have a lot of magical damage, Shogun's Consari can be very useful to bump up your teammates' damage. Specifically your ADC a lot of time is the auto attacker. So how it works is, as you see here, I have a little ruler out right now. How this works is 70 units around me, so all around here, anyone near me will get the benefit of Shogun's Consari, which is an increased attack speed by 20%, is it? By 25%. This is very useful early game item if they have a lot of magical damage and overall, like, you need protection against it. And the MP5 is very useful because a lot of time when you back with support, a lot of time it's because of the fact you don't have enough mana. Sometimes it's because of health, but a lot of time it's because you run out of mana. And the MP5 is very beneficial. Anyway, let's say for example you get Shogun's Consari. If they have a lot of physical, by the way, the items here are not in any particular order, it's up to who you're versing. If they have a lot of physical, Sovereignty might be very useful. Gives your allies increased protections, and gives you HP, gives you 200 health, 40 protections. On top of the fact that the extra 15 and extra HP 5 is very useful. It helps you sustain longer, so you might be very useful. Gauntlet of Thebes, another highly picked up support item, very high in favor. Gauntlet of Thebes is pretty much Sovereignty and Hot Word. Let me get Hot Word real quick. Hot Word is here. It does the same thing as Sovereignty, but gives more protections for you when it comes to magical. And this gives you your teammates magical protections and MP5. I'm just going to sell these to show it off. Talking about Gauntlet of Thebes real quick. Gauntlet of Thebes, as of patch 4.12, while recording this, this is one of the higher picked up support items. This and Shogun's Consari, Sovereignty, and Hot Word. Also, Emperor's Armors is pretty good. I'll go into that in a little bit. But Gauntlet of Thebes lets it so ally gods with within the 70 units, like I said earlier with Shogun, Sovereignty, and Hotword, 70 units, same with all of them. It gives both physical and magical protection, so it's very beneficial to you and your allies, and also gives HP 5. As I mentioned earlier, Emperor's Armor can be useful if you are doing a lot of sieging / tower diving. Depends on how the game's going. One major item I will always recommend on Ymir is Wingblade. When I was saying earlier with his wall, his ice wall, if he's slowed, no matter whether the time, whatever his movement is, if he's slowed, he can't go through his ice wall. Like putting it on his feet and go straight through it. He can't do that if he's slowed. However, Wingblade helps that problem because it gives you an immunity to slow and increases your movement speed if they hit you with a slow. And then and this occurs once every 30 seconds. So, the only time you can really be slowed is if they try to slow you, and then within that 30 seconds, if that failed attempt of slowing you, they attempt to slow you again. So Wingblade is very beneficial that way you don't have to deal with one of Ymir's biggest disabilities, which is his movement. But other than that, let's say for example, if you want to go more supportive, let me get this real quick. Voidstone might not be bad, but I'll talk about more Voidstone when I go with solo. Mantle Discord can be very useful. Spirit World can be very beneficial. Both provide cooldown reduction, and both passives are great. Mantle of Discord, when I hit 30% or less health, I stun people around me for 1 second and gain instant CC immunity. Spirit World helps you with the fact that if you get crowd control, because Ymir is going to be frontlining, he wants to take crowd control. Because he wants to be like, hey, look at me, I'm Ymir, come on, come freeze me, come pull me, come do this, come do that. And also because he's very immobile god, a lot of time he can't escape when he's CC'd. This will help him deal with it better because of the fact you get crowd control reduction, so you're CC'd for less. And whenever you're hit with a hard crowd control, so that means stuns, mezzes, any sort of, I don't know if Bacchus, knockups, I don't know if knockups count as a hard CC in terms of Spirit World, but I believe it does off the top of my head. Slows don't, roots don't, I know for a fact. Other than that, I'm mainly thinking about stuns, pulling any sort of chain CC, grabbing anything like that. Silence counts as a hard CC. Anything like that, Spirit World will trigger off of, and that's very beneficial for Ymir. Because you get they do decreased damage to you. You take less damage. Overall, and then lastly, what I would normally do is sell boots, traveler shoes if I got them for shoes of the focus if it's late game. Because of the fact that, but normally a lot of time you don't have any sort of late game. Because of the fact, supporters normally don't get to their 6th item. So let's say, for example, you want that. So that's in terms of support. In terms of solo, so let me sell all of these. In terms of solo lane. In solo lane, I highly suggest either Sands of Time or Soulstone. Both of them give you an extra edge when it comes to wave clearing. Sands of Time, Soulstone in particular gives you more damage for wave clearing. Sands of Time gives you increased cooldown and lets you sustain longer in lane. Then I suggest, as I said earlier, boots. Cooldown can be useful if you have a lot of magical on your team, but I normally recommend Shoes of the Magi. Second item depends on who you're matching. If you're going against physical and dealing with a lot of physical team comp, because support normally always builds auras, you can normally build Breastplate of Valor is very useful because of the cooldown, MP5, and the mana it gives, and the protections if you're facing physical. Spectral Armor can be useful if they have one of my favorite examples, if they have a Loki. Spectral Armor normally deals with Loki very well because the fear gives you, he can't really juke you while he's feared. It gives you more of it makes you more of a threat, and if they have a physical jungler, it stops gank sometimes. It can be really beneficial to have the fear on it. Okay. Another useful item to have. Mystical Mail and Midgardian Mail may be very beneficial if they're physical. Mystical Mail gives you pressure in the lane. It's like, hey, I'm I'm here. If you want to try to clear this wave, you have to get close to me, which means you have to take damage. It's very useful. It's very useful in boxing too with Ymir because of the fact that they're frozen. For you to do damage, you need to be close to them anyway. Well, actually, with Ymir, you always need to be close to them to do damage. Um, Midgardian Mail can be useful if they have a lot of basic attackers. If you're versing a hunter in the solo lane, this can be very useful. And if they have a lot of auto attacks, like auto attack heavy comp, so like they have Freya, uh, they have an Apollo, they have a Kurnos, or they have a Kali. This Midgardian Mail can be very beneficial. It lowers their damage. Instead, let's say for example you're versing another magical. Normally in that case, I immediately like going Voidstone first. Because of the fact Voidstone helps when it comes to, it gives you protection, makes you do increased damage to them because of the fact you're shredding their protection, and also helps out because the aura also affects the minions. No, sorry, it does not affect the minions, it only affects the gods. But it's still very useful. If they have healing, Pestilence might be if they have a lot of healing, Pestilence you might need second. This is again if they have like a lot of braces of undoing, they have like a law, they have Sylvanas, they have a lot of healing on their team. Pestilence you might want to rush immediately as a second item if you're versing magical, because in that case you're capable of fighting in team fights. Though a lot of time in solo lane you don't normally fight until you get your second item done, or sorry, when I say second full item done, or normally when you start your third item or finish your third item, that's normally when you start going to a lot of team fights with your solo lane. But it depends on how the game's going. As I said earlier, Shoguns can be useful also. This I would get a little bit later though. Hotword, Sovereignty, Gauntlet of Thieves I wouldn't recommend when you're in the solo lane. Specifically because of the fact the support only builds them. Anyway, continue along. So let's say, for example, you're dealing with a physical god. So you would go breastplate. We'll do breastplate, an example. We can go mystical. It's up to how we're going. If we're versing a Loki, I would either go spectral or mystical, so that way I could see, with mystical I can see him while he's stealth. And if I'm versing a Loki, and like have to worry about a lot of physical ganks, spectral armor can be useful to like pull them off me. And then they'll be far enough away, that way I can hit both of them in the cone of my freeze. Anyway, continuing onwards, let's say I get breastplate second. Next, I would normally get a magical defensive item. Voidstone again, I really like majority of the time. A Spirit Robe can be very useful. I highly suggest it. Spirit Robe can be very impactful in team fights if you get CC'd. And honestly, a lot of time, because a lot of magical damage, a lot of time for when mages do their damage, you're normally CC'd. So this will mitigate some of that damage while you're CC'd. Mantle of Discord, I wouldn't recommend yet because it's too expensive. But anyway, continuing on, we'll go Voidstone. Like I said earlier, by the way, if you're versing a lot of slows, Wingblade is a great way to go. Like if you're versing Osiris, specifically Osiris has a very good matchup against Ymir because he could go straight through Ymir's wall without having to jump or anything like that because of his passive. Because he has a slow, he uses his one a lot of time for slows, and not for the damage, but to like catch up to you and then kill you with basics. The Wingblade will be beneficial to help you escape from it. Again, and this also, let's say for example, they have a Hunbat's. Hunbat's jump slows you. Wingblade will be very beneficial to deal with that. So a lot of time when the solo lane, it's matchup oriented. So let's say they have slows, I'll get that. I normally always suggest getting Spirit Robe. Spirit Robe is great. And then at this moment, your last item depends on how it's going. If they didn't have slows, by the way, I'm just going to sell this. If they didn't have slows, Spirit Robe will be your fourth item. Oh. I'm just going to do this real quick. That way I can get to it. Spirit World will be your fourth item, or third or second, like it depends on what order this is. If you do end up not going breastplate, then in what case I would recommend for physical defense, Nemean if they have a lot of physical attackers. But continuing onwards, fifth item, Mantle Discord is very useful. Sometimes what I would suggest is if you want to show like more damage, Soul Weaver, it does true damage, it's very beneficial. You can go for E-Staff. E-Staff can be, because a lot of time your abilities combo very well with each other. You will get a lot of benefit out of E-Staff. If you have a lot of magical and you want to go more, if they have a lot of healing and you want to go do more damage instead of going Pestilence, Divine Ruin might be useful, but I don't really suggest it too much. Poly I don't recommend. Pythagorean Piece is a very useful item. I always suggest this on a team comp just because it benefits your team so greatly. If you have a mid and he did not build this, I suggest you building it yourself for either third item. You want to get this online as fast as possible because it's a great item, but you normally want defense first, depending on how it goes. So normally it would look like this if your mid did not get Pythagorean Piece, but if he did, I would suggest Soul Weaver. Just for the true damage, helps out a lot. The only real penetration you have in this build is Shoes of the Magi and Voidstone, but a lot of time when you initiate on the targets, the true damage from Soul Weaver will be more beneficial than having more penetration or E-Staff or Eternal Staff. I also want to cover something real quick. Warlock Sash can be useful, but you have to build this very early. Second item, normally a lot of time for Warlock Sash, but you have to gain stacks for this. It can be very useful on Ymir. I just want to point this out in Soul Lane. Warlock Sash can be very beneficial. And then lastly, again, this is situational, how you want to go. Male Renewal might be useful. Stone of Gaia, if they have a lot of good CC, like a lot of knockups. If they have a Kepri, a Chalk, a Wheelix, you probably want Stone of Gaia, that way you don't get pulled or slash you get CC immunity from the silence, because the Chalk's silence, also there's a knockup, and if when you get hit by that while you have Stone of Gaia active, you get the CC immunity immediately, so you don't get silenced for the 2 seconds of Chalk's ultimate, and you don't get socked up. If they have an Ares, Stone of Gaia helps out a lot. It stops him from pulling you. Other than that, there's nothing else much I really want to go over when it comes to items. Relics lastly. Relics, if you're going Soul Lane, I recommend Teleport. And then second, let me get to level. Well, Teleport if you're going into the Soul Lane. If not, it depends on who you're going against. If they have a lot of healing, like if they have Sylvanas, Cupid, Curse, Ankh, you might want to get, though I don't suggest it as first relic. Normally I would suggest it as second relic. Normally Blink is very useful. I would always suggest Blink either first or second. Ymir is very useful with Blink. Blink helps him initiate from a distance with his freeze. So let's say, for example, you have the Odin bots here. Ymir's only way to really get to these Odins is to wall them off and walk to them, and then freeze them. With Blink, what I can do is from a distance, blink forward, and then freeze. And it does that. So Blink is very beneficial. Shell, if you're going support, is very useful. Bracer, this is currently the Bracer meta, where Bracer is used like with everyone. Everyone loves it. This can be very beneficial. You can tank a lot of damage from the opposing enemy team while you're CC, especially with Spirit World. You'll tank a lot of damage. You can tank a lot of damage, and then you can just bracer up and get 50% of your health back. Normally it'll be like 40% of your health if you're at max health. One keynote I also want to talk about Bracer, which a lot of people don't know, is with Bulwark of Hope. That also counts Bulwark of Hope damage too. Even though it's a shield, it's not your actual health. It's all damage you take. So if you got healed during that too, and then take even more damage, the Bracer will still do 50% of all that damage. Let me get Bracer real quick. Bracer will do all that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not like 50% of your max health. and when it's upgraded 60%. But overall, like, again, it's a very keynote to know that Brace is extremely powerful right now. Horrific Emblem is useful if they have, again, a lot of auto attackers, and I would also go Nemean and Megaudian, which will be very useful if they have a lot of auto attackers. The slow is also useful too, but Ymir also just mainly has slows, so it might not be best because they can just get a wing blade and stop all the slows that you give. Slender, I don't highly suggest that much. Phantom, interesting thing with Phantom is you can use Phantom to bait with your own wall because your wall counts as that. I would recommend Phantom if you're versing Kabrakan, Thor, another Ymir. It can be very useful to pull off gimmicks, like you can, let's say for example you get slowed. One of the instances where your wing blade's not active or you don't have wing blade yet and you're slowed and you put up your wall, you can use Phantom to go straight through your wall. Your teammate can use the Phantom that you provide to them to go through your wall. It can be a very useful active. It's underrated in my opinion when it comes to Ymir, but it's hit or miss. It depends on what's going on in your matchup also. Beads, I can suggest this, but a lot of time because of your support, you want to get more relics that will help you in team fights. Beads will not really do that. You do have CC immunity in your ult, and if you need protection, you can get Stone of Gaia from like Ares and that. Normally, you want to take the CC for your team. That way, your teammate doesn't need to worry about it and can follow up. Spirit Robe is very useful again, as I said for that. Continuing onward, talking more about relics. Sprint, I don't really recommend Sprint at all in the current meta. Sprint is not that useful. Even though it does cleanse slows immediately when you use it, it does not cleanse slows while it is active. So it's not that beneficial. I already talked about Curse Ankh. Aegis can be beneficial, though it's hit or miss. Aegis to me is like, it's the same thing like Bracer does, but Aegis is like, hey, they have a lot of anti-healing, so Bracer won't be as beneficial as Aegis would be, but Bracer's like, I can do stuff and like bait better than Aegis, but Aegis is still very useful, don't get me wrong. I would only recommend meditation if they have executes. A lot of time I highly suggest avoiding meditation because a lot of times it's training wheels to new people, but it's personally up to you. Med is, if you're playing Ymir and Assault, Med's normally a lot of the time what you have to go through anyway. Thorns can be useful also if they have a lot of physical attack, auto attackers or high burst damage. Thorns can be very useful. Frenzy, lastly, Frenzy is useful again in the support wall. Normally what I would do is Blink Frenzy, or Blink Shell, or Blink Phantom, Blink Brace, or Blink Ankh, or Blink Horrific Emblem. Blink is normally I always suggest on Ymir. Frenzy will help you guys in team fights. Again, this is more support. Other than that, when it comes to Ymir, his job again is to be supportive. If he's playing in the support wall, his job is to help out his team. In the solo wall, he is more to be a frontliner, and he could also be a backliner. The peel for the backline, he could also be that too. Other than that, there's nothing else to really cover with Ymir. I hope you guys have enjoyed this guide, and if I miss out on anything, please let me know in the comment section below. Other than that, there will be guides every Wednesday and Thursday, and that's about it.